It is so wonderful to be with you, if only in this virtual way, so that I might share with you a few of my theological musings, sitting outside in a place sacred for me, Eagle Rock Reservation. There's a rock right behind us in that area, which is near our home in New Jersey. And glad to be renewing the sacred conversation we have enjoyed, all of us, over the past almost 10 years. I'm so happy to be back from my year-long sabbatical, and please know I have been paying attention along the way, listening to ministers Deidre and Daniel and Eclectic Praise and other mystical guests and wonderful readers of sacred texts, and certainly the spiritual wisdom of Reverend Dwayne, Reverend Kathy, Dr. Carla, and others, even as I have been listening to and reading the wisdom of other spiritual teachers in my eco-ministry course, as well as learning how to listen to and feel the wisdom of both spiritual and practical of earth. Thus, when Reverend Dwayne asked me to share some of my thoughts about the scripture assigned for today, the story of Moses striking the rock to bring water to the parched Israelites in the wilderness, I was overjoyed to be able to focus on the deep connection of God and all our kin, both human and other than human, all the members of our cosmic family. And to do so by focusing on a rock, indeed rocks everywhere, as a source of wellness in body, mind, and spirit. Indeed, what is more vital to our well-being than water? And that rock that gave the Israelites that water. So in my experience of hearing and reading this text and engaging scholarly and pastoral interpretations of it, including my own preaching, we always focus on Moses and the people and the Holy One, the eternal lover, in Nan Merrill's words, and the act of Moses striking the rock, but not on the staff, on the rock, or really even the water. And yet, as central as Moses is, without the staff and the rock, there would have been no water and the people would have perished from the lack of hydration. And this reflects what Nan Merrill writes in her rendering of Psalm 78, verse 12, and I quote, "Throughout the ages the eternal lover has shown the wonders of creation, wonders to behold." So today, I want to explore with you some of my own growing understanding of how central, how absolutely essential earth is in our spiritual health and wellness. And I will do so by focusing on the rock at Horeb, and through it, rocks everywhere. I want to begin with a personal story from a vision quest I was blessed to take 10 years ago in Yosemite National Park in California. After I and my fellow small group of seekers, led by our shaman guide Tomas, climbed several thousand feet up the mountain to 10,000 feet on the shore of Cathedral Lake, we each set up our own tents and personal sites apart from each other to fast and pray and meditate for our own well-being for several days. And I chose to be on a high promontory of granite rock where I had a clear view of the beauty of the lake and the grand landscape beyond, across the lake and around the lake. Oh, it was a glorious time to simply be, to enjoy being whole, to sit and look and feel the beauty and power of all around me, and indeed under me, the mostly smooth surface of rock. And to see pine trees growing out of bare rock. Let me say that again. Pine trees growing out of bare rock. It took me a while to grasp how unlikely this was, but when I did, I checked around these somewhat small and scraggly trees. Sure, I'd find some soil, but I couldn't find any. I just found rock. I had to conclude that somehow, seemingly miraculously, the tree roots were growing in rock and sending shoots up to grow into trees. And strangely, despite my familiarity with the story from today's Exodus reading, it never occurred to me to ask, can there be water in the rock? Water that somehow provides nutrients for the trees to live? Now, admittedly, the trees were not grand in any sense, a conventional sense of size, but they were living and they were sharing their beauty with me and the world And as I kept marveling at this and touching them and speaking to them, something I had never done before, despite a lifetime of being around trees on the tree farm where I grew up, and many occasions in forests and other great in woods and forests. And then after I'd spoken a bit, I heard voices saying, "We have missed you. We have missed you." Those words changed my life. The details of that will have to wait for another time, but it was powerful. And so not only do these trees grow out of rock, the granite seems to nourish them to grow and may even be the source of spirit for the trees. Some of you know how much I cherish trees, but what our story from Exodus, as well as my experience above Cathedral Lake in Yosemite, are teaching me is to revere rock as the earliest and oldest earthly home of the divine, of the one I call divine oneness. Just as Stephen Charleston records in our reading for today about indigenous people from his book, The Four Vision Quests of Jesus. And Charleston says, and I quote, "Native people pay attention to stones, to rocks and mountains and canyons because these first elements embody the ancient will of God in creation." In other words, and that's end quote. In other words, rocks are sources of life and well-being for all. This feels to me to be connected from when Jesus, during his entry into Jerusalem, as recorded in Luke chapter 19, chastised the Pharisees who were telling him to silence his disciples and all the others who were yelling and singing and shouting for joy at his entrance, praising God. Jesus said to the Pharisees, "If these were silent," meaning if these people were silent, "the very stones would shout out." Unquote. Jesus knows, as do indigenous people here, about rock, about stones, knows that they contain the spirit of the divine, just as do all earthly beings, that they are spiritual beings just as we are, although obviously in very different ways from us. This is indeed my larger message to you today, namely that all creation is imbued with the Spirit of God, and that God, again the one I call divine oneness, because I believe that each and every being in creation contains a divine spark, the glow of divinity, of sacredness, and thus we all make up the one we call God. So everybody is imbued with that Spirit of God. And what this really means is that we are each other's spiritual teachers. The trees and plants, the rock and mountains, lakes and seas and rivers, dogs and cats, and all other more than human animals, insects and reptiles and fungi and mycorrhizae, as well as humans with our books and traditions and social customs. All of us are in this together because we all share in the blessing of divine oneness. Now I realize that this may startle, even upset some of you. It certainly has caused me some soul searching. I remember the first time I heard someone say that nature is the first Bible. I was shocked. But later I read this wisdom from Thomas Aquinas, hardly a radical thinker, when he wrote, and I quote, "Creation is the primary and most perfect revelation of the divine," unquote. What is essential here is to realize that creation is not something other than us. We are creation just as are all the other sacred beings. Indeed, I have come to understand that we, all of us, human and otherwise, are sacred kin in our one cosmic family. And just because the others are wordless, don't speak English or French or Chinese or Russian or any other human language, does not mean they do not speak to us, do not have wisdom to share with us. My teachers in the course in eco-ministry I'm about to complete encourage me to spend time outside, wandering, moving slowly, even sitting, taking real time to not only see those around me as I pass by, but to stop and greet them out loud, as I would say hello to someone on the street. And when some one of them draws my attention, to actually stop and share a bit more about myself, who I am, where I live, where I come from, what do I do in my daily life, who's my human family, what are my hopes and dreams, whatever comes to me that I feel like I want to share. And then, of course, to pause and to listen. Listening's important. I may hear voices like I did in Yosemite, and as I've been blessed several other times. Not all that long ago, actually. Or we can be blessed without words. The key is to listen not only with my ears, but also with my eyes and my nose, my skin, my intuition, my feeling, and my imagination. Now I tell you, I struggle with this. As a writer, a theologian, a poet, I'm a person of many words, as many of you probably know, but I have been rewarded many times when I stay with this sharing and listening. And my perception is that we have been so conditioned in our culture to see nature as awe-inspiringly beautiful as it is, trees and bushes and bulbs in the spring glowing with new growth and flowers, or mountains that take our breath away, or a flock of geese landing gracefully on a lake. All of that, as well as all the terrifyingly powerful aspects as in hurricanes and drought and floods and melting glaciers forcing the seas to rise to dangerous new levels. All of that, the wonders and the horrors, as well as how our capitalist Western culture operates on the belief that nature exists primarily for our consumption and use. So conditioned by all of that we miss the spiritual depth and wisdom and all these our kin. So one more personal story. Some years ago, Dale Magin Baskerville, our own beloved Dale, gave me a small stone with the word love painted on it with glitter. From that time forward, I carried it in my pocket every day, along with a small Petoskey stone, the fossilized stone that only appears on the shores of Little Traverse Bay beside Petoskey, that's P-E-T-O-S-K-E-Y, Petoskey, in the northwest lower peninsula of my home state of Michigan, which was my second home growing up, and which land has remained a spiritual home of great power for me. And that stone Dale gave me spoke to me of how much this beautiful community at MCC DC is a spiritual home of great power. Now, sadly, about 2 months ago, I lost that MCC DC love stone. So for several months, I carried the Petoskey stone alone. But after Jonathan and I participated recently in an eco-spiritual retreat in Northwest Ireland, where I found another spiritual home, I now also carry a small stone from the coast of that beautiful land. I tell you all of this because it is in preparing this message and realizing the gift of rock in my life, connecting with Stephen Charleston's teaching and the Israelites and Jesus, I grasp more deeply the power of the stones on the beach at Petoskey as they spoke to me long ago in my childhood, just as Dale Stone spoke to me more recently, and how I begin to realize how many other stones and rocks like those in Yosemite and on the coasts of Maine and Ireland and in Massachusetts and other places I've been and loved, and in Virginia, wherever, all of them speak to me as blessed, divine beings and guides. And I begin to realize that there are so many more, including this land of Eagle Rock Reservation, from where I speak to you today. And I hope that my sharing today of part of my own journey with them, inspired by divine oneness long ago with our Israelite siblings and Moses in the wilderness of Palestine and the rock at Horeb, I hope all of that and more helps you quench your own thirst. And first of all, recognize your thirst, and also begin to quench it more on your own spiritual journey, to grow closer to all the sacred riches blessing us through creation, giving us wellness in body, mind, and spirit. The sacred riches blessing us through creation with earth and all our kin in one cosmic family. May it be so.